Yes, I know it's been months at this point since my last upload, but I'm finally here. Tanks and infantry are the two most important aspects of modern warfare. They are the two biggest elements that an army has and its main points of investment. They also constantly cooperate on the modern battlefield, but herein arises a problem. Infantry are humans, and humans are slow, well, at least compared to tanks. So here arises a need to transport the troops. Armies have been trying to solve this problem since the tank first appeared. Well, initially it wasn't really a problem, since tanks were so slow you could walk faster than them. But during the interwar period, this problem arose more and more. Many armies came up with different solutions, from having the infantry ride the tanks to keeping the tanks slow, or to mount the infantry on some type of vehicle other than a tank. These were A, trucks, which had the problem of having little armor, or B, half tracks, which were basically like trucks but a little bit more armor, and they could go where the tanks went because of their, tracks. After the war, the idea of fully tracked vehicles appeared, or at least fully tracked armored personnel carriers, as they were now known. The most famous probably being the M113, aka the Do Everything box. Then, of course, you have wheeled APCs, which still lack in mobility compared to tanks. But in the 1960s, a new concept emerged: the infantry fighting vehicle. The first example being the BMP-1 from Russia. It was a shit box, it had 8 poor conscripts in the back and 3 crew members in the front. It had a missile that you had to control with a fucking joystick, which half of the time missed your target because, you were in a fucking box getting shot at. And you had a cannon that could destroy a vehicle or troops if it managed to hit them, which was a rather low probability. Following in the footsteps of the BMP-1, many other armies made their own versions. In this video, I'll talk about the Yugoslav one, the BVP M-80. Of course, the BVP M-80 wasn't the first vehicle that the Yugoslav army tried. The Yugoslav army bought some BTR-60s and decided to use them as command posts because they are utter fucking garbage. And it had its own box that can do everything program, the OPM-60, which was an utter failure. It saw combat in the Yugoslav wars where it folded like paper against anti-tank shells, and in the Iran-Iraq war where it had the same fate. I mean, actually, it didn't have the same fate because it would get bogged down in the sand because before it could transport troops to the actual battlefield. So, in the late 1960s, the Yugoslav authorities wanted to receive a licensed production of the BVP-1, the Czechoslovak licensed production of the BMP-1. However, the Czechoslovak authorities only wanted to sell licenses for parts to Yugoslavia and have the vehicles be built in Czechoslovakia and then be bought by Yugoslavia. There were some disagreements, but the Prague Spring put an end to the deal, so Yugoslavia decided to make its own vehicle. The project name of the vehicle was the M980. The project wanted to achieve a tracked amphibious vehicle with a mass of around 11 tons that could transport an infantry group of 7 men and be armed with a 20mm cannon and anti-tank rockets. It was originally going to be powered by a locally designed FAMOS engine, but that was decided to be too weak. So a French Hispano Suiza engine was instead mounted in, with 191 kilowatts of power. This is the same engine that powers the AMX-10P, the French infantry fighting vehicle. In 1974, all of the testing was complete, with a starting series being built. The starting series was supposed to be produced in 1976. However, it was rushed to 1975 so it could attend the 1975 parade commemorating the 30th anniversary of victory against fascism in World War II. The first series was manufactured in 1978, and in 1979 it received its official designation, that being the Borbeno vozilo pešadie M80, aka Borbeno vozilo pehote M80 in Slovene, and in Macedonian I don't know. The translation is literally infantry fighting vehicle M80, 80 of course being the year it was made. Well, round it up because it sounds nicer. The engine, of course, was lacking, so another engine was put in. This was the OM403 Mercedes V10 engine, which was manufactured under license by FAMUS, which had 235 kilowatts. While it was heavier, this was an improvement in power, and of course, who doesn't love Mercedes V10s? The cannon, which was mounted on the vehicle, could hit ground targets in ranges up to 1,500 meters and air targets in ranges up to 1,000 meters. It could fire from -5 to +65 degrees, and of course 360 in the horizontal. Its aiming was helped by day-night devices which were given to all crew members. In addition to the cannon, the vehicle mounted two Malyutka or 83 Sagar missiles on the roof of the vehicle, with another four being carried in the vehicle itself. These were supposed to be upgraded to a SACLA system, however, that never came. It also carried a 7.62mm M86 PKT machine gun. Its armor was thick up to 14mm and it could protect the vehicle from 20mm armor-piercing rounds from the front. So it could definitely hold its own against a M113 or definitely all BTRs, and maybe against a BMP if it was really lucky, but it could run into some issues quickly. And of course, its main purpose, being an infantry fighting vehicle, was to carry troops. It could carry three crew members, the driver, the commander sitting behind him in a BMP fashion, the gunner in the turret. In the back, 7 infantrymen were carried. These men were armed with 4 M70 AB2 assault rifles, 2 M72 light machine guns, and 1 M76 designated marksman rifle. So these are the basics of the BVP M-80, or the M80A version, as the one with the improved engine is called. About 600 BVP M80As were made in addition to the 200 M80 basic versions, so around 800 to 900 in total. These were given to A echelon units, so the very best. They were used during the Yugoslav wars by the Yugoslav People's Army and other factions, and during the breakup of Yugoslavia were split between the breakaway nations. Of course, today the majority are owned by Serbia, who does make upgrades which I don't know all of them. It's a bunch. They all look weird, which is, I know I'll maybe make a video specifically about these modifications someday because some of them are wild. They look wild. I suspect that internally it's not as different as you'd suspect, but it's just, flesh armor, so it looks different to the media. Can tell Serbian unupgraded models and probably upgraded too, apart from others, by their striking free colored camo, which I will put on screen. The second biggest user today is Croatia. Croatia never upgraded them because they had their own issues and used the base model still, or the M80A, not the M80. Their version you can tell apart by its use of a single colored dark green camo, which I will also put on screen. It is used by their first brigade. Then you have Slovenia. Slovenia got around 60 of these vehicles used by all armored mechanized formations until being put into reserve in 2013. During this period, they were used by the units pretty much equally. However, the main user ended up being the 74th Armored Mechanized Battalion, which later turned into the 74th Motorized Battalion on its way to transition to Patria. However, because of the Patria affair, that transition still hasn't happened, so the BVP M-80 was used as a stopgap for a few years before being retired. In the end, Slovenia used about 52 of these vehicles, which were all put in reserve. In 2022, the Slovenian government donated 35 of these vehicles and later sent another 3 to Ukraine. They are used by the 24th Mechanized Battalion, if I remember correctly. These vehicles have proven themselves to be effective, although lacking in armor and armament, and their unique caliber poses some issues as it's not compatible with Soviet 20mm ammo. There is still a mystery, however, about if Slovenia has any, since Slovenia didn't receive just 38 of these vehicles, but around 52, or 52 were in use. So what happened to the rest? Of course, initially some were put into museums, like such as Piuka, and one is on display in the Maribor barracks. But as I have stated before, 52 wasn't the whole number of vehicles, as a few more were received. I suspect that some of them were used both for training and for parts, and that these were put in museums, as these displays were made when the vehicles were still in active usage. My theory is that either A, all of the vehicles have been cannibalized or sent to Ukraine, or 14 of them are still somewhere in storage. I would like that story better since I would still like us to have a infantry fighting vehicle capability, but I don't really know. The Slovenian army isn't too keen on releasing the exact numbers of vehicles, which pisses me off quite a bit, but yeah. So there is a chance we still have 14 of them, which would perfectly make a company. But, I don't really know. The army is full of surprises, so we're probably gonna find out sometime later. I suspect in around 2 to 3 years when the question of replacing our tanks will come up. Well, I suspect in 3 years because of the Slovenian budget being small and some other purchases have to be made before that, such as the Patria purchase and the impending FN Scar purchase to replace our piece of shit rifles. So, with the upgrades, one of the problems the M80A still suffers from is the lack of upgrades. And of course, Yugoslavia wasn't stupid. The Yugoslavs were keen on making upgrades. Of course, many versions were planned, such as an anti-air version, a medical version, a command version, and of course, a fully upgraded version called the M90. this would feature a 30mm cannon, similar to the BMP-2, and second generation Malyutka missiles, which were sack-loss and didn't need to be guided by a joystick. However, Yugoslavia stopped existing in this period, so that never happened. It went down the drain into the back burner of history, like other Yugoslav prototypes. The surviving vehicles will probably continue to be upgraded by its using nations, but their clock is ticking. Serbia will probably try to squeeze as much as it can from them, and Croatia is already replacing them with the Bradley, a better vehicle, which, if you look at it, carries the same amount of troops. But overall, it's a cool little vehicle. It's a mini version of what was to come with the M84 MBT in terms of production need and cooperation between the countries, as well as post breakup development. So, yeah, I liked it, and I hope you like this video. So, like, subscribe, and see you next time, which hopefully won't be in half of a year next time. So, bye, see you.